was he a team player? He would say to people, don't pass the ball to him, you're giving the ball to me. And there's no I in team, but there's an I in win. Those are the things that he would say. He would be walking up to Phil Jackson, the coach, asking, is he good enough, that player? Should he play for us? He would do trash talking, like when a player would shoot free throws in practice, he would do trash talk while he was shooting. He had a separate room in the locker room, surrounded by guards. So I do see where this is coming from. The criticism, or at least the raising questions around this. Was he a team player? Well, first of all, he did function in a team. Like, he was a pretty big part of a team. So that's one thing. And another thing is that Phil Jackson was asked, probably a million times, who's the best player you've ever coached? And at one point he was forced to answer, at least. So he said, oh, of course, it's either Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. If I had to choose, I would choose Michael Jordan because of his leadership abilities. The way he was as a leader. He would socialize way more than Kobe. He would regulate the emotional climate. That's what he said. Those were his words. And if you watch the show, he will show some traces of this, like the way he shows support for his teammates. Like after he's been doing trash talk at the free throw line, he will say supporting things as well. He will give praise. He'll do a round after a big game, congratulating his teammates after they've won. I think one of the things that bring people to the point of saying he's not a team player, there's a few different reasons. First of all, there's this myth in sports and probably other places that in a team there's no hierarchy. There should not be a hierarchy. Like, nobody is more important than others, and nobody should have a higher profile than others. And that's not the case. In the military, in sports, contexts where people are highly dependent on one another and there's time pressure, you will usually have a chain of command, and you will usually have a hierarchy. And sometimes you even depend on having a hierarchy. Like, the coach should, of course, be high up on the ranking when it comes to giving orders, as you see in this show. So it's not just Michael Jordan. So that's one thing. And I think there's another myth going on. And that's the thing that in a cohesive team, in a group that sticks together, people should be nice to one another. We should have a good atmosphere. There should be joy. And my favorite clip, probably in the whole show, is the ending of episode 7, which I would recommend you just watch as soon as we're done. It's also been spread on YouTube and other places, where Michael Jordan, was he a nice guy? That's the question that gets raised. And first, it's Isaiah Thomas. So many years he's been a competitor. He's asked, was Michael Jordan a nice guy? And he stops to think, and then he answers, he couldn't be nice. With the mentality that he had, he could not be a nice guy. He's difficult. And then Michael Jordan is asked the same question. And he gets sort of startled and he says, well, I don't know. But then he goes on to say, winning has a price. And leadership has a price. So I pulled people along when they didn't want to get pulled. I challenged people when they didn't want to be challenged. When people watch this, they might think, he wasn't a nice guy, he might have been a tyrant. And then he says, well, that's you, because you've never won anything. And at the face of it, it seems like such a rude thing to say. And it is kind of rude, but he has a point. And his point is that I like is that if we only focus on cohesion and the sense of we and to be a nice guy and have a good atmosphere all the time, then the culture in Bulls before Michael Jordan was better than the culture that he was creating. If you remember, the Bulls were called the traveling cocaine circus before Michael Jordan came. They were partying all the time. But I'm sure they had a great atmosphere and great sense of we. The thing about this is parties, any kind of group can stick together. And I mean, if that's your only reference, that can be a good group with a good culture. So I mean, if we're talking about a winning culture, the Bulls, that's not any group, that's a special group. So we need one more ingredient, which could be called expectations, or friction if you will, like certain demands for performance